My name is Andrea Liddy. I am currently enrolled as a student of the University of the West Indies Open Campus, St. Kitts. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Mr. William Hodge, the leader chosen for my course assignment, Oral History Project. As part of my course, Learning Communities in Educational Leadership and Management, EDLM 2004. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Mr. Hodge for giving me the opportunity to share your experience as a leader in your learning community. Tell me about yourself as a leader of a learning community and about the community that you led.
As a leader, through the lens of other persons, it is said that generally I am a good leader, quote unquote, a good leader. I take that to mean that I am a strong leader, I am an effective leader, and in fact, I do lead. I think that's what people mean, that I provide leadership. I think that I maybe was born with some qualities to be a leader. You know, we say sometimes leaders are born, leaders are made.
Right.
Leaders, some have leadership thrust upon them. Well, I definitely did not have leadership thrust upon me. I think that I had some innate qualities as a leader. As a leader, I consider myself to be compassionate. I can put myself in the situation of my followers, the people who I would lead, the people whom I will lead. I can put myself in their situation. So I would say as a leader, I'm compassionate. Yes, I could be tough as a leader, but yet sympathetic, empathetic. Now, I've been a leader of a number of learning communities. As a principal of a primary school, my staff, that was definitely a learning community. And we sometimes say professional learning community. The Sandy Point High School that I was principal of, that was also another of my learning communities. And now, as permanent secretary, I would still have a number of learning communities that I'm a part of. Maybe not necessarily the leader, but part of a learning community. Maybe ex officio, for example, the body of principals, I would consider that to be a learning community that I am one of the leaders, not the leader, but one of the leaders. And the body of education officers, I would consider myself to be one of the leaders of that professional learning community. But the one I want to talk about would be the Sandy Point High School as a learning community. Now, this community I led for 9 years, 9 school years. It's a rural-based school with, at the time, 65 teachers from various parts of the island, as well as a number of persons who were from outside St. Kitts, other Caribbean islands, as well as Peace Corps volunteers that came from the United States, and VSOs, Voluntary Service Overseas, that came from England. Well, we had different ethnic groups. You know, we had Caucasians, we had Americans, other Caribbean nationals. At this point in time, that learning community has changed somewhat. But during my time, that would be the makeup, the composition of the learning community. I think we had a fairly equal number of male and female, a few more females, but not too far off. The experiences, the teaching experience ranged from 1 year to 30-something years, 39 years. I remember the oldest person at the time was a teacher for 39 years. The qualifications varied from high school certification, having subjects at the CXC, right up to master's degree. Well, actually PhD. We had one or two teachers who had a PhD.
How would you describe your leadership style?
As I mentioned before, I look at my leadership style, or I look at myself as a leader through the lens of other persons, through the eyes of other persons. So I would look at my leadership style in terms of how the members of the learning community, the teachers who made up the learning community, how they look at me, how they perceive me as a leader, how they perceive my leadership style. I will say that some thought that I was heavily autocratic, which is the same thing as authoritarian. Others would see me as a mixture of being authoritarian and democratic. I like to consider myself as being a mixture, yes, a good mix of being authoritarian and democratic. So I try to not be rigid in one particular leadership style, but I will adjust my style depending on the situation I had to deal with, depending on the personality of the members, the various personalities of the members of the professional learning community. So generally, I would say that my style was one of participatory leadership, consensus building, at times dictatorial, dictatorial and autocratic and authoritarian. I use all of those to mean the same thing. In addition, I would say part of my leadership style was hands-on. In other words, I was engaged actively with the members of my learning community. Once I assign a particular task, I monitored, I followed through, and I took a personal close-up interest in ensuring that the tasks that were assigned were followed through, or they were acted on. Some people might refer to it as a little bit of micromanaging, and personally I don't have any issue with that. If somebody consider my leadership style to be somewhat micromanaging, I don't have any problem with that. I know I was able to get things done that way. But in terms of being hands-on, I was present, I participated, I assisted in supporting members of the learning community in their leadership role. Right? I just did not sit back and let persons move forward. I was beside them. I sort of joined in, a sort of parallel leadership, if you wish. Right? I enjoyed working side by side with other leaders in the school. So I would call that participatory leadership, parallel leadership, hands-on leadership.
Okay. How did your leadership impact your teamwork? You said you had different leadership styles. How did it impact teamwork?
I thought my style, my leadership style, helped to make the team a lot more cohesive together. And after every event that we have had at the school, especially successful event, there was always a strong feeling of group togetherness. you know, of the team accomplishing something. There was that strong group feeling. For example, the inter-school championships, when our high school competed against other high schools in the athletic meet, this was something that we dominated, the school dominated, and it was as a result of teamwork amongst those members of the community who had a keen interest in track and field. And so there was always that celebration and strong cohesive feeling amongst members of the team after we would have been successful at the games.
What are some of the challenges you had in promoting teamwork and how you dealt with them?
Of course, there were challenges. Sometimes difference of opinion. Every member of the team, the learning community, would have a different perspective. Well, one that would be different to the leader's perspective. I think I did a fairly good job in getting other members of the learning community to buy into my vision. You know, I thought I was fairly convincing because I use myself as the example. I put myself in their situation, and I think I was able to get the buy-in from the other members of the team, in spite of the fact that there were differences of opinion. So I think that was the biggest challenge. Yes, it took some persons a little longer to buy, to get on board. And if time was of the essence, then that could have been a challenge. I would also say that part of the challenge is that people had different gripes, if you understand what I mean. People had different gripes, especially if they were probably sent to work at the school and were not really keen on coming. You know, there were some persons who get transferred to a particular institution. They didn't really have the interest in wanting to work there, and so this could have been a challenge. This could have presented a challenge for my leadership as well.
Do you believe your leadership style worked well with your learning community?
I would say most definitely that the leadership style worked. At first, I wasn't seeing the kind of results that I wanted. Perhaps the first 2 years, first 3 years, I wasn't seeing all of the results that I wanted, but I persevered. I persisted, I persevered. On reflection now, we have a number of persons, after leaving the learning community, a number of persons thought that I built up a strong legacy. I left a strong legacy behind. Persons thought I was very successful in all aspects of the school's life, in terms of student discipline, in terms of increasing test scores and number of subject passes, in terms of the school being successful at inter-school track and field, inter-school debating competitions, inter-school drama competitions. Those successes are saying to me that my leadership style was successful. You know, we accomplished a lot, and it was as a result of the leadership that was provided to the professional learning community. I think we also had successes in improving the quality of teaching and learning. Students started to enjoy coming to class, participating more. There was a reduction in the number of students who were not doing their homework. So I think that in terms of teaching and learning, there was that success as well.
Why was that so?
The teachers bought into the vision. They caught the vision and they were motivated, they were inspired. I think that I did a good job of empowering teachers. Because I delegated, yes, but when I delegated, I didn't just give you the task to do. I delegated the authority that comes with the responsibility.
Tell me about one of the most challenging experiences you faced and how you dealt with it.
One of the most challenging experiences I had was my ability, or my inability rather, to design the timetable for the school. I did not have prior training in designing a timetable for a secondary school. So for me personally, that presented a challenging experience. To deal with it, I assigned the responsibility to my deputy principal, who had that background, that experience, and who was interested in designing the timetable. So there was that personal interest, in addition to the professional acceptance. She had a personal interest. So instead of me trying to get, frustrated or worked up about not being able to do this, I thought that the best way to deal with it was to assign it to another member of the learning community, another leader within the learning community who had that expertise. In addition to that, we assembled a team. That's how I dealt with it. Apart from giving it the responsibility to the deputy principal, we gave her a support team. Persons who had strong technology skills in terms of using the computer. So IT teachers, 2 IT teachers who were co-opted onto the team of persons that designed the timetable, along with 1 or 2 of the math teachers, because there was a certain amount of math involved. You had to work out the number of sessions, the number of teaching periods that would work for a staff of 65 plus 850 students, the number of groups and subgroups and so on. So my way basically of dealing with it was to give that responsibility to somebody who had the technical know-how to do the task.
Describe the key strategy you use to build and sustain your community.
I would put my number 1 strategy, the key strategy for building and sustaining the community, as communication. I use good communication skills to share information, to connect with individuals within the learning community one-on-one, personal dialogue, conversation. I use the opportunity to share information to everyone, because I think once you gave people information, they felt empowered. Knowledge is power, so they had information. I communicated openly. Persons or members of the learning community would say that they know exactly what I was thinking because I would say it. And so I think basically communicating with staff, with students, with parents and so on, made it easy for me to build that sense of community amongst everybody. And in a way, the communication helped to sustain it. The communication helped to build it. The communication helped to sustain it. I was able to communicate my expectations often. I think this is important. You constantly remind people, your members in the learning community, you continually remind them of your expectations. You continually remind them of their responsibilities. And the way I communicated said to them that I was holding everybody to the same set of responsibilities. It didn't matter your years of experience, it didn't matter your qualification. I held everybody to the same expectations. And I thought that communicating those expectations over and over and over really helped to sustain the community and to move it forward.
Okay. Can you share with me, Mr. Hodge, an instance of injustice or an apparent injustice based on the gender, ethnicity, religion, or a multicultural difference? And how did you prepare your followers to deal with such conflicts?
Coming to mind quickly or readily is an example of what I thought was somewhat injustice to a teacher, another member of the community, not on my own behalf, but where that teacher was accused of being racist, so to speak. So for me, that was an example of injustice on the part of a student who was being disciplined, a student who gave, some trouble or indiscipline in class to the teacher. It was corrected by the teacher on numerous occasions. The student had to be brought to me on one occasion, and in talking to him, trying to find out why he was behaving like that or why he was not cooperating with the teacher, his response really took me by surprise, shocked me. And he said to me, "Mr. Hodge, you got to remember that Mr. So-and-so is white."
Oh.
Now that took me really by surprise. And then I had to back up, sort of begin to understand why he would make a response like that. I would consider that to be an example of injustice based on race or based on ethnicity. In dealing with this, I thought the best way to do it was to have an open discussion, an open forum, where we spoke to the students and teachers at an assembly. So we took some time to discuss, the difference in ethnic groups, the fact that we are all human beings. Yes, we might look different in terms of skin color, and we might speak differently in terms of our accents and so on, but basically we are all human beings. And then I had to share my experience of the fact that as a student I was taught by several persons who were Caucasians. Mentioned we had at that point in time when I led the community, there were just a couple of those that I became principal of. The majority of our teachers were Caucasians. The VSOs, the Peace Corps and Nevis could not produce enough of our own teachers. And so we had to depend on those persons to come in to help us. They came in, they worked with us willingly. Yes, as a student I was disciplined by some of these folks when I did wrong. And so I was able to relate my own example, my own experience to the students and even to my colleagues, members of the professional and community. And I believe, as I said, coupled with my communication strategy in building the community and sustaining the community, I thought that the message was very well received, and I can't recall that any similar incident actually came up after that.
Oh, okay. Mr. Hodge, you have shared with us a wealth of information concerning your leadership experience at the Sandy Point High School. I want to take this opportunity to thank you very much for sharing with us, and I trust that the information, as I said, remember, it will be used by the University of the West Indies for the purpose of this study, and I hope you find it beneficial. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're very welcome.